Perfect. So, good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this very special occasion of being able to have a workshop with Eva Dalak, who's a dear colleague of Forum 1325. Just to say a few words about Eva, and then I'll let you. The floor will be yours. Eva is a gender and conflict expert with over 20 years of experience. Her unique background, Palestinian Muslim, raised in Jewish Israel, and educated in a Christian school, shapes her deep insight into peace building. She coaches women to build resilience and transform conflict, and works with men to challenge patriarchal norms, fostering empathy and healthier relationships at home and in the workplace. And this workshop is, of course, hosted by Forum 1325 for Political Agreement. We're a group of Israeli and Palestinian women who are advocating for a just political solution to the conflict and for female representation in negotiation and implementation of that solution. So, without further ado, Eva, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm very excited about this session. This is something that I'm passionate about, just by personal background, experience, and I would believe motivation for and purpose. So today's session is leading with impact, which is what I call gender responsive leadership. And the core objective is really to understand the core principles of what is gender responsive leadership and how inclusive leadership can transform conflict and sharing tools and strategy for equitable leadership. I consider this to be a conversation, so please don't hesitate to actually stop me while I'm sharing some of my insight and work. To ask question or raise any comment, not to wait until the end of the presentation. So the key pillar that we're grounding this in the Women, Peace and Security agenda is, of course, UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which is what the forum is named upon, which has four main pillars beyond all the other resolution that have come to be since the resolution was taken, which is participation for women protection, prevention, relief, and recovery. Now, these key pillars has been the focus of all the UN Women, Peace and Security agenda. But what I'm bringing the focus on here is we actually need to move beyond these four pillars to ask ourselves, what is the real need for women right now, despite this long process of increasing women's power, increasing women's participation and representation, we're still seeing there's power imbalances in conflict context. There's underrepresentation of women and marginalized voices that are often excluded in peace process. While at the same time, we see that when we have an inclusive processes, we have actually a more sustainable peace. And as the UN Secretary General says, women's full, equal, and meaningful participation is actually essential for sustainable peace. But what does it mean actually? What is gender responsive leadership? Gender responsive leadership is leadership that actively address gender inequalities and amplify marginalized voices. It's based on the values, it's based on the values of empathy, equity, vision, accountability, and collaboration. We often speak about like moving beyond the 4C of criticism, competition, complaining towards collaboration and contentment and consistency. So what does it look like? If you look at the key statistic, actually, 35% that are considered more durable peace are peace agreements that included women. So that's 35% that are more likely to last at least 15 years. This is from the report of UN Women 2015. 64 out of the 100 peace processes between 1990 and 2017 has no woman signatory, and less than 8% of the negotiator were women. That's like at least 10 years ago. And we see that it's still the case. Inclusion, what we see is that inclusion boosts legitimacy. When we have an inclusive process, we have legitimacy. The processes are perceived as supported by local community and actually to result in a more sustainable and long-term peace. This we've seen in the Inclusive Peace and Transition Initiative. Yet we still have less than 8% of peace negotiators that are women. If we look at the Colombian peace process, one of my favorite peace process is that the key action that were taken is, first of all, a gender subcommission was created. That was the first of its kind at the time in a peace process. Women pushed for issues such as sexual violence, lands right, political participation to be addressed. And the final agreement included more than 100 gender-related provisions. So which means that the women's leadership broadened the scope of the talk. It's not just like what we're talking about in terms of the peace process, but what is it that actually care, that that women care about, that men don't, that don't include, that aren't included necessarily in the discussion. And it increased local and international support. But beyond the representation, I'd like to invite you to reflect on transformation, because representation is just a starting point. It's not the goal. Influence means presence, which means that when we are included, we can shape the decision and not just being present. One of the key insight I received when I was working at the UN security, in the UN secretary, and we were doing gender training for a peacekeeping mission in Mombasa, was that women were saying, it's not enough for us to be at the table. It's like, if we are at the table, are our voices heard? Most of the time, even if their voices were heard, it wasn't taken into account. And even if it was taken into account, it wasn't included in the peace process. And even if it was included in the peace process, it wasn't implemented. And even if it was implemented, there was no accountability. So there's a whole series of action that needs to take place from the representation once we actually get to the table. And I'll speak about the table more later. Feminist and intersectional leadership also challenge systemic inequality. So it's not certain inequality that get to have the focus. It's actually, we have to look at all the system change, all the inequalities at the different layers and different levels. So the main point is like, don't just invite us to the table, women say, let's redesign the table together. And how does it look like? Inclusive leadership transforms the system and not just the face. It's not because we have more women in a peace process or a peace negotiation that will necessarily have a gender responsive peace process or a peace process that is taking into consideration the whole issue at stake. Leading with impact it has 5 main points. First of all, it's purpose driven. It's people centered. It's strategic, it's sustainable, and it amplifies other people. And so the issue is not to have just women, but why are we together? What's the purpose for us coming together? What is the new agenda, or what are the new topic, or what are the alternatives that we are proposing? And are we focusing on who are the people that are included? And I often say, who is missing? When we ask who is included, we need also to ask who is missing. Who are we missing on this table? And how strategic are we in terms of the impact and where we're heading? We need to focus on like not just intention. We say the road to hell is filled with good intention. And I think that intention is great. At the same time, we need to also look at how are our intention matching the action, matching the results. Impact, it's not about how many people follow you. Impact is about how many people you empower. And very often the people that you empower are marginalized and are people that no one else would have a look at. And so followers we can see clearly, but people that we empower are not necessarily seen. And so when we lead with impact, we have our eyes on like who am I empowering right now? Who is missing and to whom I'm giving the floor or to whom I'm giving a platform. When we look at teal organization, I love teal organization as a model for inclusive leadership. Teal organization is an organization that is based on feminine leadership, feminine principles such as self-management. You don't have a hierarchy. You have every person responsible for managing their own workload, their own agenda. We consider it as whole, holistic and whole, and it evolves with the purpose of what we're working on. When we connect that to gender inclusive leadership, we see that emotional intelligence is at the core of all this feminine principle and all this feminine way of being and doing. We're talking about power with and not power for or power on. We're talking about shared leadership. How are we sharing leadership and sharing the discussion in a collaborative manner? One great example is the Boerdsdorp, which is in the Netherlands, that is self-managed. It's a woman-led nursing team. And if you Google it, I think you will be really amazed by how beautiful the way they have designed the management of all this project. Somebody need to mute their it's disturbing. Let's see. So the new leadership, there's a missing L. New leadership model for peace and inclusion is intersectional leadership to recognize how gender intersects with race, class, disability. There's a youth intergenerational power that our younger voices are reshaping leadership models. And of course, care-centered competencies. Sorry. So, which means empathy, healing, and relational awareness as a leadership strength. And I've put here some examples of role models that are applying or have applied some of these inclusive leadership models. We have from Liberia, Lema Bowie, that led the women's peace movement that ended actually the civil war. The Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, that is a beautiful, empathetic leader. Gender balance policy was one core of her legacy, I would say. There's Miriam Coronel Fernel in Philippines, which was the first woman to lead a peace table, actually, peace negotiation in Asia. In terms of male, we have Justin Trudeau, despite all the challenges that surrounds his other action. He did apply some gender balance cabinet, and he has been very vocal feminist. We have, of course, Nelson Mandela from South Africa that applied inclusive and reconciliatory leadership, and Desmond Tutu that was champion for gender and LGBTQ equality. So I want to stop here and get you going in question for reflection. Like, what do you think the impact of this kind of inclusive process has on long-term peace building? And this is an open conversation in a popcorn style. Whoever wanna jump in and share.
It's possible?
Excuse me?
It's possible to talk?
Yes. Maybe raise your hand. Go ahead and then Sandra, yeah.
First of all, thank you very much. It's look very nice, but it's looked to me like a very basic what we need, and I think it's not enough. What we actually need to make a breakthrough is everyone of his side have to make some change in education before we coming to the table. And it's a bit missing for me in this plan. That's
Your
it.
question is? And your question is?
What you think we should do in terms of education of both sides before we come to the table?
Yeah, we will discuss the local context. For now, I just want to put the framework of what it means, gender inclusive leadership, and then we will talk about the local context. But before we get to the local context and the education, I think part of the education is to understand what type of models there are out there and that worked. Sandra?
Hi, thank you very much, Eva. Nice to meet everyone. Great to be here. On your question, which was about what does this type of inclusive leadership generally lead to? And just, I've been working for 30 years in peace building in various war zones in the world. And I must say that there isn't, I just want to underline something that Eva said a bit earlier. There isn't a peace process that works, whether it's at a small local level or a national peace process that works, unless it is inclusive of the various groups which are either, if you will, under attack, or minorities, or have beef, have problems with leadership, right? With the people who are in leadership. So I'm going to start with a negative, which is nothing works unless it is inclusive. And then what I'd say is that, of course, we're going to be speaking more particularly about the situation with Israel, Palestine, inter alia, but specifically, um, what the parties at the table look like is completely dependent upon the context. So what the gentleman just said, of course, is relevant. It's whom do you bring to the table and when? But anyway, on the general principle, if you don't bring the warring, if you will, parties to the table, and if you're not inclusive, not just of gender, of many other things which may be relevant in the specific context, then you will not have something that will last because there's no buy-in. And yeah, that's just wanted to emphasize that.
Thank you, Sandra. Penny, I see your
Yeah.
yeah. Go
I was
ahead.
looking for the raise my hand, but I can't find the darn button. Anyway, hi.
Hi.
It's in
I've
the
been
reactions. It's in the reactions.
Thank you, whoever that is. I've worked on peace now for 10 years and do have a peace podcast, Peace with Penny, and I write for the Times of Israel. And I put into the chat my blog just about gender, the influence of gender on peace negotiations. And even the UN says that the peace negotiations where women have been involved are 20% more effective because women naturally have, it's part of our DNA to want to have relationships. And it's been studied and it's in there, but men like to do it quick and get it done and so on. And sorry, David, but I, I, I did note there's not a lot of men on this call. And that's one of the issues that there needs to be more participation of both genders. This call, uh, when you first look at it, maybe some men think that's about women. That doesn't involve me. Wrong. That's where they make their first mistake because we need to learn from each other and we need to provide leadership uh, as people, but women have unique skills, or not totally unique, but they have a different emphasis that helps peace negotiation.
I would just say, I'll step in and say that the following of Forum 1325, I agree with you, but it's mostly women.
Oh, of
Also,
course.
I want to thank everyone for the comments, but Eva, I know you have a lot more you want to do with us today as well, and I just want to make sure we're mindful of time.
That's good. Thank you. It was a question open to everybody because I think that's the interesting is the discussion that we might have on the other question that I had, where if you have seen in your context or outside or not seen any gender responsive leadership in action, or what does leadership for peace look like in your own context? And I am seeing that there are more women than men, and at the same time, my question is for everybody, not just women and men. Is really like, how do we know even how it would look like for us once we are at the table?
I guess while others are thinking, I can I think the main signal that I see when I think of leadership is being brave enough to say the things that are uncomfortable. So not having this kind of we think, but
Mhm.
that is maybe convenient for us even on a selfish level, but something that is a bit more holistic or collaborative or not being afraid to say the truth just because it's uncomfortable for some people.
Yeah, speaking truth to power. That's what we refer to it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Anyone else?
I see Dora has her hand raised.
Yes, yes, Dora.
Yeah, I think it should look normal because through all of like we're trying to get to feel normal because there is such a big gap. The man dominant and maybe I sometimes I feel if we root it in ourselves that it's normal that women will be there in the places, we will see ourselves in an organic way.
Thank you, Dora. That leads me to the next question is what qualities do you bring as a leader in your context? If we're moving away from this theory of like how what it is and why we need it and who did it somewhere else in your specific context, how does it look like? What is the qualities of leader that you bring to the table, each one of you? What are the qualities? Yeah.
I'm just going to answer shortly that
Mhm.
I think that
And it's open for everybody. It's not specifically you,
yeah,
but I'm happy for you.
that we worthy to be there, that we equal and that we gonna bring significant addition because we see things differently and it's unique because if both sides bring both things, we can reach into a deeper understanding. It could be really rooted. And I think it's beautiful when I see situation when male and female gather together in a discussion and hearing both sides, I can truly see that. What I bring specific as a woman, but this is me, is courage to move forward and understand that it's possible.
Mhm. It's also understanding. Anybody else? Yes, David.
Ladies first.
Okay.
Hilda wants to talk.
I
Mhm.
just wanted to relate to the concept of authority,
Mhm.
to add to what Dora said, because I find very often that because in these circles women don't participate enough, that they don't have any authority. And then the fight or the struggle is to be with equal authority on every aspect of the discussion or the so it's a question and observation and a question of how to
Mhm.
gain authority.
Mhm. I think it's the authority to lead and
To lead,
to
yes,
yeah.
and to, like what Dora said, that or someone else said, that we have a unique perspective to bring to the table, but it has to be attached to the authority, to authority to bring that things, and so we won't be ignored or dismissed or just under a value, איך אומרים?
Mhm.
Not to be valued as
Yeah.
authoritative. I don't have, so it's a question also to you.
Mhm. Anybody else? I want to also, Sandra wrote in the chat if you
That's
wanna-
Nirit.
Go ahead, David.
Nirit, he wants.
Mhm.
Hi, my name is Nirit, and first of all, I'd like to say that one of women's problems when they come to the negotiating table is that the women don't really like conflicts, and the men thrive on conflicts and on arguing and winning. Women come to the table if they use turn conflicts into dilemma, they have more chances of being successful. And what I have a very long list of things that women bring to the negotiating table. I don't know if you want me to read the whole list or say the whole
No,
list.
but you can put it in the chat. I think that would be more valuable so that we
Okay,
have
but I would
time.
just say that first of all, they bring feminist ethics and they bring empathy and they see the other side. They realize the other side's pain. They respect the other side and they listen with empathy and with willing to find a mutual way that will be a win-win situation in the negotiations. They are very aware of needs that men don't consider, like, or at least in negotiations between Israel and Palestine, or it never came to the table, things like education and health and um, climate problems and sharing equally the assets both places have and so on. I'll put the list into the chat.
Put the list into the chat, and I would also add that it's not necessarily all women. I really want us to be aware that it's not because we're women and included in the table that we will have all this quality. I want to emphasize this gender responsive leadership touch upon both gender. Men can have this quality and bring that to the table, some men, and some women can be at the table and not bring that to the table.
Absolutely, I
And it's
agree.
very important to see that. And I've seen that firsthand when I was working with the UN peacekeeping mission in Ivory Coast. The main instigator of the conflict and the main manipulator of the conflict were women. And so I'm really worried about, like, I wouldn't emphasize the fact that being a woman means automatically that we will bring more to the table, but I think that's why the emphasis is on inclusion of marginalized voices. Because if we're a woman, white, privileged, it's not going to be the same voices that you'll bring to the table as women that is marginalized or that is from color or that is disabled, etc. So that's where intersectionality is really, really important, and understanding that we need to move away from this only women or only men, or putting both men and women in one homogeneous boxes, just like we do with Israelis and Palestinian. There's many different layers, many different shades of gray in both parties and in both genders, or more genders, actually.
Yeah, I
So
agree with you. I agree with every word you've said. I actually, when I talk about, I also think that many Israeli women are not able to bring all the qualities I've just mentioned, and some Israeli men who are connected to their feminist side can do it. But we live in a very militaristic society, so
yeah,
our
that's why we
experience.
need, we'll get to it about, like, what do we change do we come to the table, or do we actually change the shape of the table? I want to
Mhm.
give one more person. David, you wanted to give the
Yes.
floor for so many different.
First,
Go ahead.
yes. First of all, we don't have to make competition between men and women on those qualities. Our qualities in 2027 is simply to tell the truth. The truth from our point of view, for example, to say to the Israelis that beyond the Green Line is a state of Palestine. It's not a West Bank or territories or Judea and Samaria. It's state of Palestine. And it's very, very difficult to the Israeli to hear. They don't accept at all. And I think this quality is very, very necessary. Simply tell the truth. Even it's difficult, we should tell the truth.
Thank you, David. I'm gonna okay. MLH, last person before we continue. Yes.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Marwa Hamad from Women of the Sun. Nice to meet you all. I just wanted to emphasize about what you said about that we shouldn't exclude the men. We should have men that support the women. For us, it's very important as a Palestinian woman to be on the table, but we want non-political women that is part of the political parties, and also to have a woman that have her own voice, a leader woman, and not woman that is led by men from the behind scene. No, we want to show more women that demands for the right of us, and also show the voice of the woman and the exclusive actions that we can do as women to take care of our community. So for us, we don't want to exclude the women. We want the men that supports the woman, but we finally want the lead to be for the women. And I want to add that it's very important to build peace in our own community, because if you don't build peace for the new generation, if you don't educate about it, you can't achieve a peace agreement that is come from the governments. We want a peace agreement that comes from the grassroots movements, from the marginalized group. We want the needs of those people that lives on this land on the table. So when we achieve peace, we can implement it, not to put it, on the shelf and left it there as many peace agreements that have been done before, or take part of it that works good with the governments but doesn't work with the people. So for us, achieving the peace, also we don't advocate for one peace agreement, because we want a peace agreement that is flexible to that time, to the moment that we sit on the table to find what is the most necessary for those people that is living here to be achieved. So for us, finding a solution depends actually on who will sit on the table and the shape of this table, as you said, because maybe what works today doesn't work tomorrow. So
Absolutely. And what you're referring to is really one of the most important campaign I consider that the UN launched was He for She. And it was a campaign about how male champion support women's effort and how women and men are partners in all this process of gender responsive leadership. And I think it's really important that we understand that it's not only men and women, Israeli and Palestinian. It's like if we take the whole agenda in a partnership and in collaboration rather than in competition, I think we will have much more impact. And that's what leading with impact means. Some of the strategy I'd like to share with you is actually we need to redefine the KPI. We need to go beyond the numbers. Like how many women do we have on the table? We can have maybe a table full of women and it won't lead to an impact on the peace processes. We have to see that the impact it's actually meaning that we have an inclusive decision making, we have a cultural shift, and we have other things that are not included normally just when we are focusing on like how many numbers, how many women do we have, how many men do we have. We also need to center care and connection as leadership values. And I think Sandra Melon had put in the chat how many her empathetic participation was valued in many of the negotiation that she was part of. And I heard that from many women in conflict zone. I've worked with more than 22 conflict zones around the world, mostly in Africa, and in every single place, the values that the feminine values. So these are values that can be brought by men and women. These are the values that we as human long for. We're all longing for actually the same thing. We're longing for belonging. We're longing for connection. We're actually longing for care and partnership. And so when we are coming together in this type of values and leading with integrity, then we can have an impact on the long run in a sustainable manner. On whatever we engage in, whether it's peace process, negotiation, or other. And I love what you said, Marwa, about the fact that peace activation, we start from within. We start with the individual, actually, before we even speak with the other community. We start with how do we show up for ourselves? How do we show up in our couple? How do we show up in our families? How do we show up in our community? And once we have this, our foundation, really solid and sustainable, then we can go and negotiate with the other community. But very often peace processes not only are not inclusive of marginalized voices, but also they're going to the other communities without necessarily doing a processes or check-in within their own communities. And this is really important. How do we center the values of care, connection, empathy, accountability at the center? And then we need to design leadership spaces with, and not just for, marginalized voices. This is really key. It's just like the power with. when we are in partnership, when we are in collaboration, we're doing things with others. We're not doing things for others. We're not coming and imposing a peace process from top down. We're bringing it bottom up, and then we meet it in the middle. We need both approaches, like a sandwich between top down and bottom up, so that they meet in the center and create a space that is wide enough and spacious enough to include the variety of voices and perspective, and not consider that because we belong to a certain identity or a certain community or a certain place or country, that we have specifically this or that type of values or this or that type of perspective, and that allow more spaciousness for peace processes. Key to that means that we're amplifying marginalized voices in decision making. We're paying attention who's actually taking those decisions that we're applying. We're building diverse leadership teams, and also any team. Any team need to have to be as inclusive as possible. And again, the main question I say, who is missing? Whose voices I didn't see, hear, or consider? We're addressing systemic barriers. We're practicing emotional intelligence. And also, we're challenging institutional barriers. We cannot assume that what is accessible for me as a privileged woman or man is the same case for someone else without me checking. And there's tons of tools, like the amount of tools that we have around since the UN Security Council resolution was voted, and even before that, we have tons of resources that are just not applied, not implemented. And when implemented, there's no accountability mechanism to see how were they implemented and what impact did it have. And some of these tools are UN Women, Inclusive Security. We can look at Teal Organization. So I'm inviting in the session to how can we lead across divides? How can we navigate political complexity? Complexity doesn't mean complicated. I often hear, oh, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is so complicated, we cannot touch it. And that was my perception before going and working in other conflict zones. And the main reason I went to work in other conflict zones was that I was too triggered to work on my own conflict. Because as Palestinian, growing up in Israel, being in a Christian school, like I perceived the complication of my identity. But actually, once I started traveling outside of our conflict zone and working on other conflict zones, be it Burundi, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Afghanistan, Pakistan, like you name it, I've been there and I've seen how local people, grassroots level, including Liberia, how do they come together to lead and define an agenda for peace, not an agenda for a certain political party. And that's the key. So we really need to stay grounded in our values, even when under pressure. And I would say, especially when we are under pressure. Right now, just being present with what's happening is actually an act of resistance. Not denying what's happening is an act of resistance. Speaking up with what's happening is an act of resistance. And practicing listening across lines of differences. And that's, I want to refer back to what you said, David. It's like you mentioned the truth, but each truth is individual. We do not hold one major truth that we can impose on different people. We have to be able to listen, heart-centered listening, as we call it in peace activation, to the other perspective, knowing that this perspective doesn't represent me, but it doesn't deny my existence. And unfortunately, in our conflict, very often when I speak my truth, is as if I'm denying your existence. Or when you're speaking your truth, you're denying my existence. We need to move beyond this existential level of communication to be able to see what is actually right now happening. Right now, in this traumatizing conflict situation, whatever we want to name it, what is happening and how can we work within and against the system of change. We need to change the system, and some of us are working within that system, some of us are working outside that system, some of us are working against the system, but we're all working towards the same goal. And that's where we need to work across this divide and lead with our heart rather than our mind. And that's what I call it, lead with integrity and vision. And what is this vision? What is this vision that we have for our context, for what's happening right now? That's been triggered since 75 years or more. And some people started on the 7th of October, some like different lines of time are also references that speak towards what each person consider as the truth. At the same time, if we are communicating across this divide and leading with integrity and towards our end goal, our vision for peace, peace right now is such a bad word. How did we move from a place where peace is sacred to having bashing this type of these words and the people that are working towards it? So there's several things that I would like. We don't have much time, but we have 15 minutes, and I would like to speak about like what are the commitment that we can take forward, each one individually. I really believe in peace activation being we are the activator of peace. Peace is available. Even if right now we don't believe in it, we think it's a horrible word, we are feeling disempowered, disengaged, we're not knowing what to do with ourselves. What can I, as an individual, do? What commitment can I take to move forward beyond this helplessness and powerlessness that is imposed upon us in this situation? And I'll stop sharing. I'll open the floor, but I just want to invite you to reframe leadership for peace. Inclusive leadership is not about who gets a seat at the table. I really want to repeat that. Having someone at the table doesn't necessarily mean that their voices are going to be included in the peace process or the peace agreement. We had many women in the Yemen and in Sudan that were included. Some of them are included in the table, but what they said wasn't taken into consideration. And as I said before, even when it's taken into consideration, it's not included in the peace processes or the peace agreement. And even if it's included in the peace agreement, it's not implemented. So we really need to move beyond this. Let's get the women to the table. We need to change what the table is made of. We need to change who built this table. We need to change how everyone gets to speak. How is it inclusive? Who shape and reshape this table? And let's actually build it together. And I'll open for question and discussion here. Like what is one commitment? We can take 1 minute for each person. What's one commitment that we can take on? David?
My commitment is that I will continue to spread our view or our vision that we have state of Palestine, not a territory or not a West Bank. It's very, from our point of view, it's very, very important to understand that we have to deal with the state of Palestine and with the equal platform. This is our commitment to continue to spread this idea to the Israeli that beyond the green line, we have a state of Palestine.
Thank you, David. I just plugged my battery, that's why I was moving. But I think like anyone else, individual commitment, I find often it's easier for me to commit to something I can do rather than expect what other people will do. Yes, Penny?
Sorry, I didn't write down where the darn hand raise thing was. I work every day, 24/7 on peace, primarily between Israelis and Palestinians by interviewing peace organizations, as well as writing for the Times of Israel blogs. That is my commitment. It's been my commitment for 10 years, and that's what I do.
Thank you, Penny. Sandra?
Well, for my part, because I live and am based in Brussels, which is the heart of the European Union, and of course the European Union as an institution and its bilateral governments are playing an active, implicit and or explicit set of roles on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And my commitment is to continue to engage when I disagree with the ways in which they are engaging or not holding people accountable. So always pushing for, you know, the right parties, the inclusive parties to be at the table, and also always questioning whether the party line that they're toting is the right one to lead to an actual peace building table and a peaceful future, both for Palestinians and for Israelis. So that's my commitment. That's what I do.
I see Obi as well has her hand raised.
Yeah, hello everyone.
Yes.
My name is Obi. I'm speaking from Nigeria actually. My commitment, I was part of actually 2250, you know, which is Youth Peace and Security, and I know the relationship between 1325 and 2250, so that actually brought me here. My commitment is Eva. Now, whatever you do, I'll support you to do it. So just let me know, and I will definitely support you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Obi, for the comment. And MHWOS.
Thank you, Eva.
Sorry.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, my battery just cracked as soon once Sandra finished. I don't know if I missed someone else that spoke. I see Obi and Marwa. Yes, Marwa?
For me, as a Palestinian woman, like I carry within me a generation of pain, love, and resistance and hope. I have seen the cost of the conflict that etched into the faces of the mothers and heard in the silence of the lost homes, and felt in the dreams that we're still fighting to protect. But even in the shadows, I choose light because there is no other choice for me. I commit myself to the path of peace for my children, for the new generation. I not a piece that denies my story, but one that honors it with like truth, with justice and dignity. So I will use my voice to build the bridges where there are walls, and to heal well where there are like wounds, and to uplift the women around me who have never like stopped believing in the possibility of a better life and better tomorrow. So peace is not only for us, it's for my children, for my grandchildren in the future. So this is what we are working today for. Like to have, it's a daily act of courage rooted in the love for my people and the faith in our power to rise, not only to survive. So that's why I'm here. And that's why we need all the voices of the women all around the world to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marwa. Yeah, you're touching upon many elements that are actually related to the trauma, the intergenerational trauma and the collective trauma that very often doesn't actually allow us to lead with integrity, that are some of the barriers that I was referring to, that even if the intention is good, the outcome doesn't matches the intention. And so we need to move beyond intention, address the trauma. And I often say we need to drop the drama around what's happened and what's happening, and how can we actually face it without denial, and how can we heal our trauma, each community individually, because the traumas are different and we need to stop comparing these traumas, and each trauma is valid in its own, but it doesn't justify any act of violence. And I think it's only when we can heal the trauma that we can actually activate peace and allow the peace that is available for us to really amplify the voices around us. Yes, I am. I see that you have your hand.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Eva. So my first commitment, I absolutely believe and commit to women leadership. There's no doubt in me, and supported by men believing this. So we are building that culture. I believe so. And that's the example I want to share with my kids for future generation. And the second aspect, the second fold is working on my own inner peace, because I come from a French culture of 2000 years of wars and conflict in Europe. So I cannot just say it doesn't exist in my memories. So I have to acknowledge my own wants and to work on that. Okay, so for example, my grandmother, my grandparents, they were unable to talk about the war. So much they suffered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ayam. You're bringing also another dimension of the collective traumas that this is very often we're discussing Israeli and Palestinian, but this conflict is not coming out of nowhere. It actually has legacies from Europe colonialism and that are not addressed. And as long as we address it as one side, one homogeneous side against another side and polarized position, we're not going to find healing in the polarities. We only can find healing in a holistic and inclusive and redefinition of the issue. And that's very often where we can step out of the main conflict of the issue, redefine what we're talking about and where we're heading with the vision, and then coming to agreement on how can we move together in partnership. And I think that's an important element. Again, thank you. Anyone else? Don't have much. We have 6 more minutes, and I want to give, if there's no other person that would like to share a commitment or ask a question, I will pass it to Yasmin and Forum 1325. And thank you for the invitation. I founded Peace Activation actually at the next day of October 7, 2023. And at the time, I was in Mombasa doing a gender leadership training for the peacekeeping mission of the UN peacekeeping mission based in Somalia. And I remember being at the base of the UN and hearing that the UN wasn't able to come to agreement for a ceasefire. My whole work of 20 years of working for this system, understanding that this is it for me. This is like, I actually want to change things and I cannot change it anymore within the system, which was my belief before. And I stepped out and I created Peace Activation as a field that is beyond right doing and wrongdoing. It's a field that is the act that I committed to, which is I'm going to open a Zoom on a weekly basis and invite anybody who is interested to come and share their feeling, where they are at, and listen, heart-centered listening, practicing heart-centered listening without arguing and without commenting or comparing suffering, so that we can see how radically different we are and how our perspective is not here to deny the existence of the other, but it is our perspective because that's our experience. I have family that died in Gaza right now. So for me to come here and say, I want to invite you to hear my story without denial, without saying, no, this is not true, this is not happening, this is propaganda of the Hamas, this is that, deny my very existence and my very experience, just the same as I cannot deny your experience and your story. And so peace activation is about how can we activate peace inside of us and deal with our triggers and take responsibility. That's where we lead with integrity, because we are accountable for what we say and what we do, and not just for our intention in our heart and in our mind. And so I invite you, you can go and check our website, peaceactivation.org. We have weekly gathering. We have on Sundays, we have workshop every week on Wednesday where we teach these tools of listening, of art therapy. And then I'm often in the region. I'll be in the region in May, and we will be doing training on trauma-informed leadership and trauma-informed peace. So I invite you to check those out, and looking forward to continue the conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you
very
very
much, Eva,
much.
for sharing your experience and your knowledge, and for everyone on the call as well for sharing such hope-inspiring experiences and commitments. We will be uploading this to Forum 1325's YouTube page. And also, Eva, if you share some links with me, I can send a follow-up email so everyone can follow Peace Activation.
Yeah, I'll share also the presentation. I see that somebody asked. I'll share the presentation and I'll share some of the links that we have. Thank
Thank
you
you
all
very
for
much.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
so much. It was
Peace,
amazing. It was great.
everyone. Salam,
Have a good night.
shalom.
Salam. Thank you.
Bye.